On tonight's episode of the Unselects, hey buddy, can you spare 10 cents? How about 10 million bucks?
The DPW and Town Hall expansion project is 25% over budget. What is the town going to do next? I'm Gregg Richards.
And I'm Brian Costello, and we are the Unselects.
Brian, in tonight's episode is going to be the first of two episodes focused on a doozy of a select board meeting on March 11th. Two topics. We're going to be covering the DPW and Town Hall expansion project status update. And then on our next episode, we're going to be talking about the Pulte project and 40B. But before we dig into the content tonight, I wanted to just kind of make a couple of quick announcements here. You know, as I think all of our viewers know, I am running for select board, and some have asked, hey, if you happen to get elected, are you still going to keep doing the Unselects? And the answer is, I think so, but I'm not quite sure. So I hope to be doing that because we do have some good episodes in the hopper. And actually, one of the episodes I want to mention is we are doing our first episode on Shrewsbury Public Schools. Yeah. And the question I would like to pose to people is, are you aware that Shrewsbury Public Schools has two Department of Elementary and Secondary Education violations that they have not disclosed to the public around bullying? So that is something we're going to be digging into. So if you have any experience around bullying in Shrewsbury Public Schools, feel free to shoot us an email and let us know in preparation of that episode. But moving on here. The topic I really wanted to talk about here tonight, the take we're going to have, is really around expectations. And I think we've talked about this before, is that one of the things I believe we could be doing better as a town is setting better expectations with the community. We've talked about it with expectations around the warehouse project. When people show up to meetings or to public hearings, what's the process? What can they expect? Same thing with MBTA. How is that process going to go? What can you expect of us? What are we going to share? So it really dives into one of the key initiatives of the town, which is trust and transparency. So with that, let's dig into the DPW project here and listen to the assistant town manager, Keith Baldinger, who had presented to the select board and give them an update on the budget of the project. So let's take a listen.
Late last week, we learned that the most recent cost estimate is approximately $10 million over the budget that we had in place. This comes from an estimate completed by our construction manager, Risk Fontaine Brothers, with an independent estimator, the OPM, and the designer. The reconciled estimate placed the total project cost at approximately $40 million. This exceeds the approved $30.5 million budget. This was unexpected and has required us to quickly regroup and reassess the project scope.
Totally unexpected.
Unexpected.
Out of the blue.
Well, yeah, and we're going to dig into this. We're going to go all the way back to the beginning when the project was first introduced to the community. How did they build the budget along the way? And how do you get to a point where you end up being, like I say, 25% off of what you've told the community and actually what you've almost gone to and created an article for a town meeting on. So yeah. We'll see what happens here. So one of the questions that was asked right after this was from Michelle Conlon regarding, if they would have happened to gone through or if this wasn't brought up, who would have been paying? So let's take a listen.
This is sort of an 11th hour. Mm-hmm. We're just a few weeks away from bringing this to town meeting and to voters.
Yes.
In May. So I just want to understand, who would have been liable for these costs if we had moved forward?
Well, the community, I would suppose.
You suppose. Actually, Michelle, it's the magical budget fairy that's going to come and drop $10 million on us. Obviously, it's the taxpayers. The question doesn't need to be asked because really the thing is, we know what's going to happen. We messed up, and now you're responsible. You being you, me, and the taxpayers that are watching the show.
Yeah, and I do want to just kind of pause here for a second and just say that I personally think that this is a project that we should be doing. We should be supporting the employees of the town, especially the DPW, highway, water and sewer, because if we expect, let's say, world-class services, we have to enable them with the tools to provide those. But like I said, this focus of this episode is really on how are we setting the right expectations in these projects in the community. And we're going to talk and we're going to look at how the committee, which is an appointed committee, went through the process and how ultimately we're in a situation where now, unfortunately, I think there's been a lot of loss of trust because of this big overage.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So let's move ahead. One of the things that Keith had mentioned was talked about reconciliation. So they're going to explain what a reconciliation budget for those who are not in construction is. So let's take a listen.
To going through most every single item on the project, arrive at a reconciled estimate. And so that means the two estimators agree within a reasonable percentage, like a couple of percentage points, that they see the project costs the same. And the second question is, well, what is the budget? And then the task is to find a way, we don't know if it's close or not close, we'll find out in a couple of weeks, to get the project to budget.
Okay. So the interesting thing about this is that what he actually says is the way this works, just to back up a little, we'll talk a little bit more about it and you'll see it again, is that the original budget was based off of what they call 10% drawings. So only 10% of the design. So effectively, I think the shell of the building is what they're showing primarily, where basic rooms are, but not the detailed mechanical or, all the little structural details. Then they get the 60% drawings, which were effectively only released right around this February 19th timeframe. But they had done the budget, which we'll see back in September, which is what they actually brought to Fall Town Meeting, which was based off a totally different set of data. So this is the quandary, if you will. So two different people, two individuals, looked at this and came up with this new budget and said, we can't do it for what you thought. It's actually $10 million more.
Yeah.
The only question I have is, one of those estimators was from the designer who had been designing along the way. So my question to you is, what's the recourse the town has to say, if that person has led us all the way down this path, have they provided us bad data? Or how does that work?
Yeah, what's the level of expertise that we bought ahead of time to that point, right? The initial drawings. Those people are supposed to be expert at this. They could go into court and be experts at this sort of thing. How are you that far off from what you thought if you've done this for years? So what's our recourse to that point? We paid those people, and they were really wrong.
And it's 6 months ago. This isn't like 6 years ago.
Exactly.
It's 6
Not
months.
much has changed.
No. So let's just I'm going to go back to the first televised committee meeting. This was back in July of last year. And I want to listen to Beth Cassavant, who's a select board representative on the committee, and kind of hear how she talks about budgeting and a number that she throws out. And we'll talk about it afterwards.
I feel like the first number someone hears is the number that sticks in their head. And I want to be very clear with the public that we don't have that number yet, but that we understand that there's going to be a baseline of what's expected from the voters, that we are going to be putting forth a project that is not extravagant, but that meets the needs of the community and meets the needs of our workforce in a way that is respectful of what we're asking the taxpayers to fund. So I don't know if that helps you at all. Certainly not looking for something that's $40 million. We just did a police station for about $42 million.
A little bit under that.
Right, but we have a reputation in Shrewsbury of coming in on time and on or under budget.
Okay, she was doing really good
Yeah.
until the $40 million.
I was actually applauding her. And I think her point was, well, it's obviously not going to be $40 million bucks.
Right, and I feel like that was the right. And then back to the expectations. I think that was the right move to say, look, it's too early. We can't make the budget.
Yeah.
The one error, right, is throwing out. Well, it's obviously not going to be as much as a police station.
The
That
police
was way
station
more
was
complicated.
$42 million. I'm thinking, how is it more complicated than a police station?
Yeah, exactly. So down the same path, I'm going to go back even further in time when Kevin Mizikar first addressed the need for this project. And I want you to look at the slide and the number that he has on the slide as he talks about it. But let's hear his explanation of why the project was important.
The new project that I want to speak about this evening is DPW needs. We've spent a lot of time looking at the needs at South Street. They are our oldest existing facilities of any municipal facilities that currently exist today. The water and sewer garage was built in the 1950s, and the highway/general DPW garage was built in the 1970s. They're showing their age. They have a lot of investment needs regardless of whether we move forward with a comprehensive project there or not.
And if you notice the number there, what was that number there, Brian?
$10 million.
Yeah, and I don't know where that number came from, but that is not setting the proper expectation. with the
No, I
community.
think it came out of the blue. I'd love to ask Kevin how he came up with that number. What was it based on?
Yeah, I have no idea because it is way off of where it ended up being. And I think this is my point is it goes back to if you don't know, I mean, I would think putting question marks in there and just saying, really not sure of the scope because we're not sure how we're going to execute the project. It's important, not really sure.
And I also think, and this is not throwing shade at Kevin, but, he's a member of the Mass Municipal Association. You speak to a lot of folks. People have built these garages
Right.
in the past 5 years in Massachusetts somewhere. What's the estimated cost for this? There are similar sized towns. There are things that you could have said, look, we don't know. I would have been satisfied if he said, it's between 25 and 30 million, some number like that. We don't really know. We have to do a little bit more research, but we think. But that expectation was set first as, it's going to be like 10 million bucks.
Right.
We all agree the DPW, that building is horrendous. We believe that we support the DPW workers and the people that are working there. I wouldn't want to work in those conditions,
Right.
but it is setting that expectation.
Right. And I guess the worst case scenario is I think, right, I'm speculating here, of course, but I think there's always this perception that no matter what number you put out to the community, they're going to perceive that it's too high. So you're almost afraid to be
And
too
it's
high.
probably true.
It could be,
right?
but I mean, if you said, it's going to be expensive. If you set the expectation, say, unfortunately, this is really necessary, and I'm just warning you, it's going to be expensive, but, this is why it's so important. Knowing that regardless of what the number is, you're going to get pushback, and then you're going to run into this situation here. So I do want to move forward here because Kevin does reference the elusive police station number again, which is the trap of a reference point. And let's listen to how Kevin says to the select board back in March of last year after introducing us to the $10 million number. So let's listen to what he says.
This project is nothing like building a police station. The cost is a quarter of that, maybe, and then it's even further mitigated. I'll say half of that, maybe, with the biggest scope that we could pursue. It's further reduced by, using utility rates. So
Yeah. So again, the expectations. So he says half, even if we did the biggest scope. So now
He said
it's
a quarter
20.
at first,
Well, he did.
right? And then he's like, well, okay, let me give myself some leeway here. We'll go half.
Right. Right. In not having enough information, I don't know why you're trapping yourself into that position at that time. So moving on here, and we're going to go back just to remind everybody what the timeline is, because this is important. The reason why this was so important is right now we're looking at a April special town meeting to approve the borrowing authority, and that would lead this to be on the May ballot. And we only have, let's say, five weeks from then. So let's go back to October and before the fall town meeting and listen to not only the budget at the time for the project as well as the timeline. So let's take a listen.
Starting with the full amount, the 32.5 million. This is broken out by the 27 million from the South Street garage design through the work of the MFOC committee. And then right now, a conservative estimate for town hall of 5.5 million. Now, if we were to break these two projects up a little bit further, starting with the DPW garage, that's going to be funded about 16.2 million through the utilities and 10.8 million through the general fund.
So what we didn't talk about is the town hall upgrade. So you meant there was 5.5 million. So the way you get up to that at the time, they said it was 27 million for the DPW, 5.5 million get you to 32.5 million because there was ADA compliance, bathroom renovations, life safety, HVAC. So the building's old. It's going to need work over time. Fair.
Yeah,
I mean, you have an old house, so.
partially fair. Yeah.
Would it cost you 5.5 million to update your bathroom in your 1723 home?
Won't do that. No.
So now he's going to explain here the timeline, which is the timeline we're on now as far as the special town meeting and the ballot question. So let's take a listen.
Slide here helps provide a project timeline for the DPW garage and town hall feasibility and design project. Step one here is the special town meeting. The article will request 60% of the design cost to be funded with available resources, to then move to a special town meeting in April of 25, requesting a borrowing authorization less the design cost previously appropriated in the this special town meeting. Then there would be a ballot question in May 2025 for a possible debt exclusion for the general fund portion of this project, which is about 16.3 million. And then construction would begin on the South Street portion of this project in August 2025.
That's an aggressive timeline.
Yeah, it was more aggressive if you remember from Kevin's earlier
Yeah.
on, but yeah, and that's why right now they have to actually create the article for the special town meeting. That warrant has to get signed by the select board. Then they actually have to craft what the ballot question is going to be, because you need to know how much money you're going to go ask for, and then that kind of leads us down the path, because there are also, I think, as we know, that we've realized that anytime there's ballot question, you get a yes and no. So they're going to be going out to the public and asking for somebody to write a pro and con position statement that's going to go along with the May town election. So a lot going on. So let's go back and listen to the original, when they first talked about, say, the budget that was based on what Mr. Snowden was talking about, when the committee actually came up with that $27 million number. Let's listen how they came up with that.
Initially, the budget came in higher than this. This number's at 26.8. With that coming in higher, the project team embarked on the effort to create a list of items, value engineering items, from which we can select from the list of what we should incorporate and what we shouldn't incorporate. The key here is to keep the program intact.
Dave, I guess my question is, see a number up there of 26,000,008. We're doing this project under Chapter 149A, Construction Manager at Risk. Would that be, that 26.8, if this is what we're going forward with, would that be the guaranteed maximum price?
Yes, though, the guaranteed maximum price would not include the soft costs.
Okay, yes, though. So soft costs, what he was talking about, it's listed on that spreadsheet. It's $535,000. It's not a major number.
Yeah.
So they are going to talk a little bit about the next clip on construction manager at risk. What does that mean? But I'll give a high level. So the construction manager at risk, you bring in essentially a general contractor. Normally, I guess that's the function they served. Fontaine Brothers was in the same function in Shrewsbury for the police station. They've done it before. Now, what that allows you to do is bring the general contractor in early, really lock in the budget, but here's where you get a little bit of contingency, or a lot of contingency, because that budget, when he talked about guaranteed maximum price, they have to do the project at or below that number.
Right.
So if you had to do the project at or below a number, where's your number going to be?
At the number.
And probably a little bit.
Little higher.
A little higher.
Yeah.
Because you have to have a lot of contingency, because if you're on the hook, if you say, hey, it's going to cost $40 million guaranteed, and it costs 45,
You're on the hook.
you're on the hook.
Right.
Now, the other key is they don't really want to way over budget, because there's no benefit to them. I did look this up. So you cannot, the construction manager at risk does not get, say if you say it's 40 million and you do it for 35, you don't keep the 5 million.
Right.
That doesn't happen. You're open book with the town. Whatever it costs. The only thing you can do is you can incentivize the construction manager at risk up to 1% of the construction costs in incentives. So in this case, say it's 30 million, it's 300 grand. So it's not like it's this exorbitant amount of money that would cause somebody to, hey, I'm going to pad the number. That way, we're going to sell it, that it costs more. So that's not what they're doing. They're just making sure that I absolutely can build this for that. We may end up building this for less than this, but like I said, the whole communication around this is not clear, and they don't explain this to the community and say, this number is probably higher. We have historically come under budget, and here's why. It's just, they don't say any of this.
Right. I mean, I see 26 million, which was higher than what they originally estimated, and now I'm hearing 40 million.
Right.
Which is way higher. So obviously, the construction at the manager at risk, they're going to go with whatever budget is the one that's most beneficial to them anyway. If Vertex is coming back saying we've estimated it at 40 million, the bid more or less is 40 million.
Well, they were the one in the reconciliation. It was
Yeah.
Vertex and Fontaine.
Yeah.
So Fontaine had their estimators part of reconciliation, and that's what they came up with. But the one point I did want to make too is they already said, if you caught it, that they already did value engineering. So as part of to get to the 27, they're already telling people, we already looked at this again, we've scaled it down, we've taken things out, we've really optimized for cost. So everybody has this belief that, oh, they've already worked this number over and it's a
Right.
good number.
Yeah.
But it obviously wasn't.
Not close.
Not close. So let's listen to how they explain construction manager at risk and what the benefit could potentially be.
One of the decisions we made was to go with a construction manager at risk instead of design, bid, and build. Because we went construction manager at risk, there's a process to that. You get the initial number, and then which is about a 10% design completion. You then continue to 60% design, which really matures the numbers significantly. And through that process, as these numbers were reconciled, these are the numbers we came up with. The whole project, the full scope at 40 million, and then the alternates.
So essentially saying, laid out that process again, 10% and 60%. So the other thing I do want to show here, if people aren't as familiar with the project, I think, many residents could say, hey, is the size of this accurate? Is this the right scale of a project? And we're going to listen to, the question was asked of Mr. Garcia and the select board actually asked the committee, and they talked through it here. So let's take a listen to their explanation on, is this the right size building? And is this what we actually need for the town? So let's take a listen.
If this is approved, will folks be surprised by the size of the project?
It's a really good question. So I think initially when they look at the renderings, because we're putting two buildings together, the water and sewer and the highway, it's going to appear bigger than it is. So when we first looked at the renderings, again, we said too big, and we immediately shrunk it down by almost 8,000 square feet. Again, we shrunk down the window size, which not only is more cost effective, but it's more inexpensive to install. Whenever we do a building, at least the history of Shrewsbury is, we don't do it for right now. We do it for 35, 40, 50 years, and that's the plan on this building as well.
So listening to that and watching that, is there any, I guess my question to you is, do you feel as though they've done due diligence to get to the budget based off what he just said there?
No, not in the least. Because if you think about it, when you even look at the past, they're talking about current costs. They're talking about sort of current needs. Nobody can actually predict 35 years in the future. I think that's sort of lip service a little bit. But no, I don't think they've done that work.
It did look large.
It's a giant building. Yeah.
And most of it is a garage to hold vehicles. I think in the middle is, because they're retrofitting, and we're going to talk about that now.
Yeah, there's an office building or whatever you want to call it.
Right. And because there was two buildings there now, one kind of stays. So let's listen. We're going to go back to the March 11th meeting here, and we're going to listen to what caused some of the overages, and we'll talk a little bit about that.
The estimated overage is the result of multiple factors. Market condition uncertainty and increased costs of materials and labors have escalated significantly since the original budget was developed last fall. At the same time as the design evolved, some aspects of the project became more complex than initially anticipated, contributing to higher than expected costs. Examples include structural requirements for the new roof on the existing DPW building, which require phasing to not impact operations, and items related to the new energy code coming into effect with the 10th edition in July.
Now, I'm sure we could spend a whole episode on energy regulations causing increased building costs.
Yeah.
And people have seen that with delivery costs of Eversource. And when you start talking about energy efficiency, as much as you hear efficiency means less money, it seems like it's increasing everything.
It increases your cost.
We're not going to talk about that now. But one thing he mentions is phasing, and I want to dig into that because they're keeping this 211. There's 207 and 211. 207 is long in the tooth. It's got to go. 211, still in pretty good shape, and they can reuse some of the bones, and that was the plan. And there's a question asked by John Samia regarding, okay, I know you're reusing it, but what if we just leveled it and started over? What would be the impact?
Yeah.
Let's take a listen.
So if we take the square footage and we're repurposing or refurbishing 211 and replacing 207, consolidating, Any idea, like, that costs us, that saves us quite a bit of money as opposed to building a full complex of all this square footage and not having the space, right?
Right, so, and I'm just hoping I understand it correctly. So if we build completely new down there and didn't renovate, just all new, so it's probably a $15 million premium on top of the 26, something like that.
Okay.
So what's 15 plus 26, Brian?
Like about $40 million.
Wait a minute.
back.
Wait a minute. We
Yeah.
got back to 40 again. So I guess I'm confused now. Is that we were going to save money.
Yeah.
However, the professionals, let's go back to what you had said.
Yeah.
These professional engineers and these professional designers who say, yep, we're going to save money on it, now say, actually, there's unforeseen circumstances
Probably cost you more.
that might actually cost us more. So before we kind of plow forward to this, maybe we should go back and say, should we revisit it? Is it now less expensive just to tear the thing down and rebuild it? Because
Yeah.
it seems like we're at the same number.
Right, and probably run into less problems, to John Samia's point. Leveling a building and rebuilding it is going to cause you less problems than having to, retrofit something that now we know there's all these regulations around it. You're going to have to do. You're basically rebuilding it anyway, except it might cost you more.
And it'll probably take you longer to do
Yeah.
it because you're trying to keep it operational, right?
Yeah.
So who knows what can happen? So if that pushes the project schedule, who knows the extra cost you could take? So just another option there and an interesting piece. So let's go back to listen to the committee, talk to the select board, and when they actually themselves let the select board know that, hey, there's a little bit of overruns in the budget. So let's take a listen.
I am here tonight on behalf of the Municipal Facilities Optimization Committee to provide an important update regarding the DPW and Town Hall project. As you know from last week's meeting, recent cost estimates significantly exceeded our original project budget. The project team has worked diligently to revise the project scope and identify cost-saving measures to maintain the goals of the project, but the estimate is still above the original project estimate.
We're still above. Yeah. And then they go and they give us options. So we're going to move right into, well, what do we do about it? We either A, spend more money, or we can make changes. And they give us 3 options. So let's listen to those options and then we will discuss.
So the first figure I'll give is the total project cost, complete, including the work at Town Hall and at South Street, and that is the $40,389,000 figure. The first alternate is to remove the Town Hall from that project. That makes a $35,950,000 project. If we then look to remove office space, that gets it down to $32,900,000 project. We looked at the fuel island. If we leave that fuel island in place instead of replacing it, that's a $31,925,000 project.
All right. So when we look at what they wanted to do, it was to essentially get all vehicles under one roof. It was to move staff all under one roof. So a lot of staff, Town Hall second floor. Some staff was over on South Street, wanted to get everybody together. So
Yep.
the office was important. And then they also talked about, their fuel, because they have vehicles. I think there's 150-ish municipal vehicles that they service. It's not just the DPW and highway. It's like police, fire.
Right,
And
yeah.
then so having an area where they can fuel up is probably more cost effective than maybe everybody going to Flynn's or somewhere with a gas card. So when I look at it, that last number, did he say it was a $31.9 million garage?
$31 million garage, $32 million garage.
No office,
No office,
no fuel.
no fuel, or the same fuel. I
Right.
think they weren't going to replace the fuel.
Right. And none of those important upgrades to Town Hall could happen.
Right.
That all got pulled out.
Yeah.
That seems like a very expensive garage.
That's an expensive garage for sure. Unless I misread it. Maybe he's saying, the way I read that was cumulative. No, which seems right?
Yeah.
Remove 35, remove the 5 million, you're down, yeah. And then it's just a big garage.
So it's $10 million is all you can get off of it.
Yeah.
And really, it's not even that. It's 4.5 because 5.5 were in Town Hall, which is a totally separate project.
Right.
It was just trying to get back to saying, we're only going to borrow what we said we were going to borrow.
Isn't that just a big steel building?
Right.
Isn't that what they're trying to build over over the aquifer? It's just a big steel building. They should get GFI to do it.
Yeah. Well, I've actually asked a question. I actually asked, why don't we just have a developer do it and lease for 20 years?
Yeah.
That way, they own the construction, they own the maintenance, they own, a lot of that. And guess what? We're good for the money because we have a AAA bond rating. So it is one thing. I actually asked.
Is that an option?
Well, I asked Kevin about it.
Yeah.
And I don't think they've ever run the numbers. I think it is feasible. I think you're allowed to do it. And I think it would just be, what are those costs? And of course, then it's an operating expense versus a capital expense, and
Yeah.
totally different thing. So we'll talk about that on a different day as an option. But moving on, the select board's response to this, we definitely want to listen to and talk about. So first up would be Michelle Conlon, her response to the changes or proposed changes.
Given everything that's happening right now with the price changes and potentially changing the scope of this project, if conditions at town hall are changing, does delaying this off of our, special town meeting and Maytown ballot, does delaying that kind of allow us, I think it allows us more time for more clarity on exactly what we'll need, what our town hall needs will be, what our DPW needs will be. I feel like, just given the timeline and the magnitude of these changes, the right thing to do might be to delay it.
You could delay it because then a really important funding source, a question is not on the ballot, right? And that means less people go out and vote. And for Michelle, maybe that's what she needs. But, it's funny that the delay comes up so quickly when other important issues were definitely not delayed.
Yeah, let's
MBTA, other things.
Well,
Yeah.
I was going to bring that up, but I was going to listen to the other comments first.
Yeah.
But yes, we'll hold that thought for a second,
Okay.
because we'll listen to other comments from other select board members and see how they frame this up, and then we'll get back to that
Yeah.
comment for sure.
I'm right now not comfortable with the current timeline for the special town meeting and May ballot question. My concern is that it doesn't allow time for
Community feedback.
community feedback.
Okay, that's a fair point.
I would like to pause and think on this more, and also do some more homework internally. And I think one of the things that I hear out in the community often is that perhaps some of our decisions feel rushed.
What I'm hearing is consensus that let's pause. Let's take the time to make sure that residents have had an opportunity to be heard, and we've had a chance to explain the good work that the committee's done.
So now we're going to pause.
Now we're pausing.
know?
Everybody's agreement to pause now.
Yeah, and actually, maybe I'm being too harsh, because potentially what you and I and the balance of the no campaign along MBTA and the referendum, maybe they listened. I will say,
Maybe they
because,
learned their
because
lesson.
Carlos
Yeah.
did say, hey, maybe we rushed it, or we got a lot of feedback that it seemed rushed. Now we're going to pause. But, I do think that it is a little selective on the
A little
pausing.
ironic, maybe. I do agree. I'm glad to hear it, actually, in some ways, right? But it seems ironic, yeah. But maybe it is the work of townspeople that have watched this show and done a lot of work that have made them think more wisely.
Maybe, but
I don't know.
And here's my maybe but, because the last thing we're going to talk about here is they published the select board agenda
Yeah.
for the next meeting. And they did this on Friday, and the meeting would be Tuesday. So here's what is on the agenda, and I would like to look at that. And if they really did pause, the items that are highlighted, I do not believe would have been on there. So it's the pause that they discussed, I don't believe is a pause, because they are going to review and sign the special town meeting warrant. They're going to review and act to place a question on the ballot for May 6th, and they're going to provide notice for proponents and opponents for the yes and no for the ballot question. So I don't believe the pause actually paused. They paused for 1 week, I believe.
Yeah, so it was lip service, potentially. I don't know what, or one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing. It'll be interesting to see what happens. They could vote to not put it on the special town meeting, right? They could.
Yeah, they could. They could vote and say, that no.
Yeah. We said we wanted to pause.
Yeah.
Right. So let's see what happens there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know the answer though. It'll be interesting to see how they vote.
Yes, and I will be watching, and I hope everybody at home will be watching too. And that's all the time we have tonight. On our next episode, like we mentioned, we'll be digging into the other topic of the March 11th meeting, which was the Pulte 40B. So I'm Gregg Richards.
And I'm Brian Costello.
And we are the Unselects.